Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Eye Opener Society and welcome back to a Thursday night sermon. I thank you all for being here. Don't forget, this is every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We come to you with our sermon, bringing you words of wisdom, regular talk, or whatever is on our mind that we hope can be an inspiration to you. So I thank you for being a part of it. And why don't we jump into this tonight? Again, my name is Gary Dean. I'm one of the founding ministers of Eye Opener Society. Tonight, I want to talk to you about something that I think every one of us has experienced at some point in our lives. Although we may not have recognized exactly what was happening when it happened, I want to talk to you about your true spiritual self. I mean, not the person that the world sees, not the person that your job requires you to be, and not the person that your family expects you to be, not even the person that you sometimes convince yourself that you have to be. See, I'm talking about the part of you that exists underneath all of that, the part of you that seems to emerge when everything becomes quiet. So, think about a time in your life when you were completely overwhelmed. Maybe you were angry about something, maybe you were afraid, maybe you were hurting, or maybe you even simply had so much going on in your mind that you couldn't figure out which direction to go. See, you were thinking about yesterday, worrying about tomorrow, and trying to deal whatever was happening right in front of you. Your mind was racing, your emotions were taking over, and you couldn't seem to find a way to make sense of any of it. And then, somehow, something happened. Maybe you sat down and became quiet, and maybe you went outside and looked at the sky. Perhaps you even prayed, or maybe even meditated. Maybe you simply reached a point where you exhausted from fighting with your own thoughts, and then, almost without explanation, something changed. The circumstances didn't necessarily change. The problem may have still been sitting right there in front of you. The people involved were still there, and the situation hadn't magically disappeared. You still didn't have all the answers. Something inside of you became quiet. You suddenly felt a sense of peace that you couldn't really explain. Your mind wasn't racing anymore. You could think clearly, and you could see the situation from a different perspective. And sometimes you even found yourself knowing what you needed to do next. That's an incredible experience because nothing outside of you necessarily changed. You changed the way you were experiencing it. Now, for me, meditation has been one of the ways I've been able to find that place. And I want to make something very clear about that. When I meditate, I'm not trying to escape my life. I'm not trying to pretend that my problems don't exist. And I'm not trying to become somebody that I'm not. What I'm trying to do is get past all the noise long enough to hear myself again. See, we spend so much of our lives listening to everything around us that sometimes we completely lose touch with what is happening within us. We're listening to other people's opinions, we're listening to our fears, we're listening to our responsibilities, our past, everything that tells us who we're supposed to be. Somewhere underneath all of that is a quieter part of ourselves that doesn't get much opportunity to speak. I believe that is where we begin to discover our spiritual self. I'm not saying that your spiritual self is some perfect version of you that never gets angry, doesn't get hurt, doesn't make mistakes, and never experiences fear. That's not realistic. See, we're human beings. We're going to experience every one of those things. We're going to have bad days. We're going to make decisions we regret. We're going to say things we wish we hadn't said. We're going to experience loss, disappointment, anger, and pain, but I believe there is something deeper than all of those experiences. You are not your anger. You are not your fear. You are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. Those are things you've experienced, but they don't have to define the entirety of who you are. Sometimes when we become quiet enough, we can actually see that distinction. We can recognize that there is a difference between what we're feeling and who we are. See, when I'm angry, I can say, I'm experiencing anger rather than believing I am an angry person. When I'm afraid, I can recognize that fear is moving through me without allowing fear to determine every decision that I make. So when I'm hurting, I can acknowledge that I'm hurting without making that pain my identity. That small difference in perspective can be incredibly powerful. See, when we're completely controlled by our emotions, we don't always make the best decisions. We react instead of respond. We say things because we're angry, and then later we wish we could take them back. We make decisions because we're afraid, and later we realize that fear was making the decisions for us. We close doors because we've been hurt, even though the person standing in front of us wasn't the person who caused the original wound. When we find that place of peace, something different happens. We have room to think and see, and we have room to make a choice instead of simply reacting to whatever emotion happens to be the loudest. And now, to me, this is where spiritual part becomes so powerful, because spiritual awareness isn't necessarily about knowing everything. It's about becoming aware enough to recognize what is happening within you before it controls what happens outside of you. So think about that for a moment. How many times in your life have you reacted to something simply because you were emotional in that moment? Or when you said, I wish I had waited before I made that decision? How many times have you looked back at something and realized that if you simply given yourself a little bit of time and silence and a little bit of distance from the emotion, you may have handled it completely differently? This is why I believe stillness is so important. We live in a world that doesn't seem to know how to be still anymore. See, the moment we're alone, we reach for our phones. The moment where our minds become quiet, we find something to fill the silence. We're constantly watching something, listening to something, scrolling through something, talking to someone, or worrying about something. We've become so accustomed to noise that silence can almost feel uncomfortable. What if that silence is not empty? And what if there's something waiting for you there? What if the reason we are uncomfortable with stillness is because stillness gives us an opportunity to finally hear what we have been avoiding? Maybe that's why meditation can be so powerful. It gives us an opportunity to step away from the constant reaction and simply observe. You don't have to solve your entire life when you're sitting there. You don't have to figure everything out, and you don't have to force an answer. You simply need to stop adding more noise to the noise that's already inside of your head. When you do that, something remarkable can happen, and your perspective can change. Same situation that seemed impossible an hour ago suddenly seems manageable. The decision that seemed confusing may become clearer, and you may recognize something you haven't seen before. Hey, you may even realize that the answer was there all along, but you were simply too overwhelmed to recognize it. See, I believe energy is a part of that experience, as we are constantly exchanging energy with the world around us. And then we carry the energy of our experiences, emotions, and our relationships and the environments we place ourselves in. We can walk into a room and immediately feel that something is wrong. We can be around someone who makes us feel peaceful, and we may not even know exactly why. And we could leave a conversation feeling completely drained, or we spend an hour with someone and walk away feeling completely renewed. So, what happens when we carry that anger, resentment, fear, and pain for years? And what happens when we never give ourselves the opportunity to release some of that weight? Eventually, we can begin believing that the weight is who we are. See, but it isn't. And maybe part of spiritual alignment is learning how to release what no longer belongs to us. Now, it doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending that people didn't hurt us. Um, it just means understanding that carrying that pain forever doesn't punish the person who caused it. It only continues to occupy space within you. Now, we need to reclaim that space and we need to make room for peace and clarity, and we need to make room for ourselves. So, let me ask you something tonight. When was the last time you truly became still? Not, and I'm not talking about sitting on a couch watching TV. I'm not talking about scrolling on your phone. Um, I want to know about lying in bed while your mind is still running through every problem you've had. See, I'm talking about deliberately giving yourself 10 to 15 minutes where you don't have to accomplish anything and you don't have to be anything for anybody. Just sit and become quiet. Allow your thoughts to come and go without chasing every one of them and see what happens. So you may be surprised at what you discover. Because maybe the person you've been searching for your entire life isn't somebody you're supposed to become. It's somebody you're supposed to uncover. So maybe underneath all the fear is courage. Underneath all the anger is hurt that needs to be acknowledged. And underneath all of the confusion is clarity. And maybe underneath all of the noise, there is peace. Peace doesn't mean your life will suddenly become perfect. Doesn't mean your problems will disappear. Doesn't mean you'll never become angry again or experience pain, but what it means is that you begin developing a place within yourself that the chaos of the outside world cannot so easily reach. So imagine what kind of person you become when you can carry that peace with you. Imagine being able to walk into an argument without immediately becoming part of the argument, or being able to hear something that hurts you and take a moment before responding, or imagine being able to make an important decision without allowing fear to make it for you. Imagine being able to look at something that once completely overwhelmed you and say, I can handle this. I may not know exactly how yet, but I can handle this. That's powerful. And I believe that's something we all have the ability to discover. So perhaps tonight, instead of asking yourself, how do I fix my entire life? Just ask yourself a different question. How do I find my way back to myself? Maybe that journey begins with 10 minutes of meditation. Or maybe it begins with sitting quietly outside. Or by closing your eyes and simply allowing yourself to breathe and exist without demanding anything from yourself. Whatever path takes you into that stillness, find it, because we spend an incredible amount of time trying to find answers outside of ourselves. And we always look for people to tell us what to do. We look for that perfect moment, and we look for someone to rescue us from our own confusion. Sometimes the greatest thing that we can do is become quiet enough to listen to the part of ourselves that has been there the entire time. Your true spiritual self isn't waiting somewhere far away. It isn't something you have to purchase. And it isn't something somebody else can give you. See, it's already within you. And the journey isn't about finding something new at all. Perhaps the journey is about removing everything that has been covering it. All the anger, fear, expectations, resentment, the constant noise, the endless need to have an answer. Until finally, underneath all of it, you find yourself. When you do, you'll discover that you were stronger than you thought, wiser than you realized, and more capable of finding peace than you've ever imagined. So tonight I want to leave you with this thought. The world is continuing to make noise. People are going to continue having opinions, and life is going to continue throwing challenges at you. There will be days when you feel lost, angry, and when you don't understand why things are happening the way they are. But don't be confused. The noise around you or with the truth within you. Take a deeper place inside of you. Find it and spend time there. Get to know the person who exists when nobody is watching and nothing is demanding your attention, because that person may be closer to your true spiritual self than anyone you've ever allowed the world to see. And perhaps the greatest awakening of all isn't discovering something outside of ourselves. Perhaps it's finally becoming quiet enough to discover who we've all been all along. Again, my name is Gary Dean. I'm going to be turning things over now to our wonderful Lizzie, our cosmic fairy princess. Let me just bring her on board here. Lizzie, the spotlight is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And first, I wanted to say thank you very much for your speech today. That was so beautiful and well timed with mine as always. In case this is people's first times tuning in, we don't ever really know what the other person is talking about beforehand. But I almost told Gary what I wanted to talk about today because it felt like it was so much from ego. But I was like, no, just leave it and just keep it to yourself. And it kind of turns out magical as every week seems to. The thing is I spent a lot of time trying to teach both sides of the coin, and you can't. It gets too messy and confusing, and so you have to pick one. And so the side that I picked today, the side of the coin that I want to talk about, Gary so beautifully spoke on the other side that I felt I had to leave out, but it's so important because stillness is how you learn how to respond versus react. But it's also a piece that got to me for so long as someone who prided herself in being a good person and all of these things. It created its own web in my brain instead of eased it like it was supposed to. And that's kind of a little bit about what mine is. But stillness is so important, and what I speak about today can only be felt good about after you find that place of stillness. This is super important, and I almost wish I would have said that a little bit very better. Thank you for Gary for so magically starting that out. I did hesitate on sharing the story because it felt like a lot of ego. I'm never really proud of when I yell, but I thought about the earlier version of me, the one that spent way too much time trying to figure out how I was supposed to respond and way too much time shaming herself for not responding correctly. I thought sometimes we yell most when we actually think we never should yell at all. And truly, all that matters is how your body wants to respond because that's the bridge to how your reality is being created. So here's my ego. Earlier this week, I yelled at a couple of preteen boys, which I was not proud about because they were preteen boys. Whi- So as I drove down to the park, where I knew our interaction likely would involve me yelling because I'm loud, I felt the need to make an impact on those boys and the daughter and her friend that were in my back seat. My daughter comes home from the park and tells me that she got bullied. And I ask questions to help her process and hopefully not take it personally, because kids can just kind of be mean or whatever. But my questions led me to piece together a picture that didn't really look like bullying. It looked like a couple of boys too young to know how to flirt and too young to know the time and the place for these things. And I'm not going to tell my daughter, "Oh, he likes you," right? We've hopefully all moved past that, even if you think my response here was too extreme. Most of the time, when something like this comes up for her, I just acknowledge to not be around them. If someone's mean to us, we don't need to be around them, even if they're throwing in some mixed signals as well. But this one was a little different, as the one who apparently liked my daughter was in the bathroom, the men's public bathroom at the park. And after trying to get her social media info, these two boys then try to get her to get at least closer to the bathroom where the little brother supposedly was. She didn't get close to the bathroom, probably talked to them longer than was needed, but we all learned that in our own time. The girls came home when the little brother popped out of the bathroom and yelled something because they felt it was weird and it was time to come home, and I'm just ever so proud of them for that. She felt bullied, but I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if she got closer to that bathroom. I wondered, even if these boys were innocent today, what would they eventually escalate each other to doing near and in men's bathrooms in the future? A million thoughts in my head. How my body is reacting, how I'm cosmically supposed to be interpreting this. What's my pattern? How and what am I shifting here? I couldn't answer all those questions, and I couldn't quite interpret how my daughter was deciding whether she internalized this or not, which was really my focus. whether I'm supposed to make this a scary warning, brush it off, etc., etc. Is she allowed to go to the park still? I don't even know what happened, and she doesn't even know what happened. So I asked, "Do you want me to go down there?" And at first she said no. And then she got curious as to what I would say if I went down there. And I said, well, I'd ask them why they were trying to get my child into in the bathroom, and I'd ask if they needed to get the police or their mother involved. And she laughed and then thought about it and decided maybe she would let me get involved this time. I always offer when she doesn't know how to handle something, but she never lets me. But I'm not usually in a spot threatening to call the cops, so a little maybe different. So now we drive to the park, and I'm aware I'll likely yell, but that's not cosmically the quote correct response. But I want to make an impact before a potentially innocent misunderstanding becomes another girl's story later on. I want to be cosmically aligned, but truthfully, authenticity is the most cosmically aligned you can ever be. I breathe and I calm myself and I feel my heart stay relatively close to pounding. I'm pounding more, telling the story, than I was driving to this. Drive the speed limit. I get out of the car slowly, and I get to the skate park, and I tell him from across the skate park, I need to talk to you. And he looks shocked at me, and I say, yes, you. And I kind of get into it a little bit. And of course, first he denied it. And then I pointed to my car and I said, if I'm wrong, I can go get her to point out the correct person. And that's when the story changed. And he's telling me it wasn't like that. And I want to hear him out. But by now, his friends have come up and they're all arguing with each other and trying to talk over each other and tell me what happened and who did what and what was said. And so I shout over them all to stop. I want to hear the story from the person I came here to talk to. And when he starts telling me again, his friend starts telling him to shut the fuck up. So eventually, I'm yelling shut the fuck up to a bunch of preteens who are all shouting at me to shut the fuck up in the middle of a skate park where everybody's staring at us. And we do this until I shout over them that they're going to let this kid tell me what it was like, or I'm calling the cops and they can explain it to them what it was like. So now they're quiet, and the kid tells me a story pretty similar to my guess. The little brother liked her, and then he chickened out. Now none of us are shouting, and I explained to them that that was not an appropriate way to do it. That wasn't flirting, and flirting never takes place next to a public bathroom. That is where the most likely place for someone to get assaulted, and putting a girl of any age in a position to question your motives is never acceptable, not flirting, and will not be tolerated. They all apologized. I apologized. And me and the kid I came to talk to shook hands and I left. 1,000 TikToks echoed in my ear about how the moment you lose your cool, the other person wins. The yelling is a sign of emotional maturity. And I agree with every single one of those, even in this moment, that I still chose to respond this way. Because I also believe that there's a time and a place for fierceness. That's why so many of us spent parts of our lives diving into it before before returning to the softness that we originally came in. Not engaging with what you don't want to continue does stop you from aligning personally with it. But in some instances, we are co creating, and being a mother creates a kind of a complicated dynamic there with these sometimes. And if something you've healed keeps coming back in through other people, even through like politics in the world, the thing is it is in alignment for you somehow. But not like you're destined to experience it or become it or you even have to fix it. Maybe you're just the right person to change an aspect of it, even just for one person. Maybe since we're co creating the world, we have to honor what other people are exploring and aligning with to bring in what we know. Give them the Easter eggs of the path we've already walked on. Maybe they don't have to go all the way down just to understand what's at the end. In my journey, I knew enough about adolescent boys to know I had to come in hot or they wouldn't respect me in a moment like this. I knew enough about men to know that I needed the crowd around it to hear in order for them to take me seriously and to hold themselves accountable. I needed all of these boys to think that there always might be a mother to answer to. I needed my daughter to know, and I knew I needed my daughter to see me from going from soft to fierce to soft again. And I knew that all of these were true only because I believed them to be. The conversation at the park turned out exactly as I predicted it would, from my yelling to us having a good conversation at the end. When you act authentically, instead of trying to tailor everything to be the best way, you actually have far more say in how things turn out, assuming you have stillness first. It was just me and my intentions, no plan, no best case scenario. Know that what you believe in is true only because you believe it. But give yourself space to believe it because it's true for you. That's exactly how the world is going to come in for you until it's no longer true for you. Your body always knows what is true and what is right for you right now. And there are moments to explore cosmic theory, like when you're feeling good. And then there are moments to honor the cosmic theory that runs in your bones. Those, wherever they land right now, are the ones that are creating your reality. And if there is more you can give after healing something, you'll still witness it. I'll gladly show the next generation the fierceness I have summoned over the years, the permission I built for myself to stand up to a man of any size and tell them that that's not appropriate. I built this for myself, but I'll share it. So sometimes the universe gives me a moment to pass on that permission to the next one. Meet every moment with authenticity and grace. If you do this, one moment won't look the same to the next. But that authentic response is the exact one needed for the moment in so many more ways than you can see in that particular instance. Even if you could have been chiller, even if they could have been chiller, that's where the grace comes in. Because I went down to yell at some kids as an angry mom, but I didn't yell from ego or much of one. I yelled from a soul who's healed too much to be afraid to be out of resonance in my response, who understands there's a time and a place for everything, who understands the difference between reaction and response is whether you're conscious of it and not how it's done. I yelled from a place deep in my heart that is willing to demand safety for children at the park, and my response was valid because that is what a mother is for. Thank you.
Okay, that was an unbelievably powerful and important sermon. I want to thank you, Lizzie, so very much for that. And I mean, I could probably add on so much to that, but I want that entire message to resonate with everyone. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in to our sermon tonight. Remember, every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Facebook, YouTube, we are live. Or check out the recorded version at eyeopenersociety.podbean.com. Thank you again, everyone, and we will see you soon.